This is the session called Grow Back Greener, which I'm confident has less to do with foliage and more to do with sustainability. As I was saying earlier, it's certainly true that lockdown did see significant improvements in our air quality, significant reductions in London's carbon footprint. And there are many people who are asking whether we could embed those benefits into the new normal, as Shirley and others have been saying. And with the 2050 net zero carbon target, what changes could we make to transportation, to development, to build business to help us get there? And we have a really interesting panel too for you today. David Simons is the UK Sustainability Director at WSP. Say hello, David. Turn your microphone on. We'll just get a brief chance to see you. Say good morning.
Hi, Mark. Good morning.
There he is. That's one of the joys of Zoom, is that you actually have to say something or wave your arms frantically to be seen. But thank you very much to David. Paul Walker is the Corporate Director for Community at the London Borough of Harrow. Say hello, Paul.
Morning, Mark. How are you? Good.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much. Bipin Jha is the Managing Director of WorkWork. So good they named it twice. Bipin, say good morning to everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Bipin. Very nice to see you. Jacinta Rousel, I hope I pronounced your name right, who's the General Manager of Westfield. Good morning.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Morning, everyone.
I'm delighted. And Nathan Pearce, who's the Programme Director at Sharing Cities. Nathan.
Hi, everybody.
Well, welcome to one and all. We're going to hear from all five of you. But first up, to give us a bit of perspective on the importance of net zero and its implications for West London, here's David Simons from WSP. David.
Thank you, Mark. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you, and delighted that we can talk about this important topic. Let me just start by context. It's sometimes easy just to trip off the tongue that we will be a net zero economy by 2050. So just unpack that for a moment and think fundamentally what that means, which is that effectively the UK and the West London economy phases out, to all intents and purposes, the use of fossil fuels from our buildings, from the businesses on Park Royal, to how we travel, from our delivery trucks to the cars that you and I own. All of those over the next 30 years have to transition away from petrol, diesel, oil. And just understand, if you think about that for your business and think about the stuff that you use, how much of that has used the fossil fuels in their manufacture, from plastics to bricks to steel. It is just a massive change in how the UK and West London's economy works. And legally, the UK has to do that. This isn't a nice to have. And if you then bring that to West London, 6 of the 7 boroughs have declared climate emergencies. So not just, again, some platitudes, all of them pretty much now have plans that will say this is how we are going to address that, and this is our target. So we were just hearing there from the leader for Ealing. They've set a target to be carbon neutral by 2030 for the borough. That is a mighty change. So I would say, just for my introductions, I've got 5 points that I would make. The first point, we really welcome as WSP the Build and Recover plan. That is a really good, strong document, and it is tremendous to see green at the heart of it. There is large amounts of money available right today from government to support and get that going. The Green Homes Grant Scheme, public sector decarbonisation scheme, as that comes on, through to the money for smart travel that Grant Shapps announced earlier this year as well, and phase 2 just about to be released. There is large amounts of money there from the public sector. There's a great opportunity just to crack on with that. The second point I'd say is that skills, again mentioned in the Build and Recover plan, are a really important part of that. So one of the stats that really stood out for me in the plan is that only 9% of London's workforce today is aligned with the low carbon economy. And yet, for example, if you take West London Gas in Northfields. Their business at the moment, if we're going to transition to a net zero economy, that is a business that will need to get skills in heat pumps, and it will also potentially need to understand what a future for hydrogen means. If you are West 3 Garage in Acton, you are busy servicing cars. You will need new skills in terms of servicing electric vehicles and the like. So a great opportunity to think about that before we even think about, from a buildings profession and a trades and an electricians, about how do we install huge numbers of electric vehicle charging networks? How do we retrofit every building and every office in West London so that they are net zero over the next 30 years? How do we, as for example, Berkeley Group has leadership on at the moment, their modern methods of construction on modular build. These are the here and now specifics, and there is just some great opportunities for West London to really make sure it accelerates that. And I would say that's a particular opportunity and a gap potentially that the plan just launched can address, because West London's 2018 to 2023 skills, employment and productivity strategy, although it was only written a couple of years ago, makes no mention of green jobs in that. So there is a great opportunity to align and do more on that. Point 3, I'm sure Westfield would agree as well, that development is a key part of building back. You can think about all of the grand schemes in the world, but fundamentally there is just a great opportunity to get on with it. Do it fast. And deliver out. And there are some big schemes that we're involved with, from Kensal Canal side to the Southern Gateway around North Acton. The more we can accelerate those, the better we can get on with it. Point 4 I'd make is Greenwood in leadership is an inward investment opportunity. And if I just give you an example on that, we worked with County Meath in Ireland a couple of years ago to develop their climate strategy. And there, Meath really focused on invest your business in Meath because we are a green economy and because we are a resilient economy. It was a great line, and that was instrumental in Navan attracting Google as their Irish headquarters, bringing round about 2,000 to 3,000 jobs to a city, which I promise you, if those of you know Navan, it's a beautiful city, but it's probably about something like Shaftesbury in comparison. So there is an opportunity for West London to take leadership. And my last point I would make is let's get on with it together. But the boroughs have their climate emergency strategies. Most of them now have plans. The challenge that I would say boroughs have is they can lead for their own operations. They can enable through their plans and their programs, but there is just a huge amount for Inspire to catalyse work together, and local authorities can't deliver their commitments themselves. For business, there are some great opportunities to also grow as well. WSP, our Future Ready programme, See the Future More Clearly and Design for that, is really setting WSP apart. And that is a top-line growth opportunity for us as well. That wins us work over our competition. So together, I would say there is the opportunity for West London, opportunities for local authorities, opportunity for business, and we know residents and the communities really support this work. So I would commend this panel, I would commend Green, and we look forward to working with West London on delivering its Build Back Better plan. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much indeed, David, and thank you for deploying the Shaftesbury comparison, which I haven't heard for a long time. It's really great to have that. So now we're going to talk to Paul Walker, who's Corporate Director Community at the London Borough of Harrow. Paul, David was talking there about massive change. This is a very, very significant alteration in the way that we, what normal looks like. And I'd be interested to know, what are you doing in Harrow to help your borough to net zero? How radical are you being?
Yeah, happy to talk about that, Mark. Thank you for that. I'm not sure whether we could equal the Google inward investment story, but we're certainly on our way at this stage. But thank you for that, Mark, and thank you, David, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the green recovery theme within the West London Economic Recovery Plan, talk about Harrow, and talk about soft power and collaboration, how you get things done across the public and private sectors. I think for me, it's important to recognise that climate emergency became a key priority for all the West London boroughs pre-COVID. And we now have an opportunity for the COVID emergency and the climate emergency to be tackled together at the same time as a unique opportunity. I think for me, it's important to note that the green recovery we talk about is both a discrete and a focused theme within the recovery plan, but it's also cross-cutting. We share an ambition that any recovery in the round has to be a green recovery, bringing shared ambitions around climate action, but also growth in the green economy, and we do that together. Yes, we've set out a series of offers and opportunities for investment within the recovery plan itself, but it's pretty clear that green touches everywhere: our aviation communities, skills and employment, growth sectors, and housing and infrastructure. And I don't know who finally edited the recovery plan, but the word green crops up over 30 times, so that can't be a mistake in itself. But what we're doing in West London as a whole coming together, and what have the boroughs come together and they're working on? Well, firstly, we talked about it, it's very much about top of the trees retrofitting, creates employment and decarbonisation. You know, our first bid is a £4 million joint bid across all the boroughs to retrofit up to 800 homes by March 2021. And that starts a decade of retrofitting across West London. We're going to be working with the supply chain and encouraging a circular economy across West London. And we've got plans to develop and shape an emissions measuring framework. So we have a consistent approach to what we're measuring, the progress that we're making, not just in West London, but across London as a whole. But I think fundamentally for us is about sharing that learning as we go, and sharing that learning across the public and the private sector. Let's not reinvent the wheel across the different parts of London. Let's share and do that together as well. And fundamentally, you know, as leaders around developments and placemaking in local authorities, we want to make sure that all our new developments are low carbon. We're working with our green supply chains by putting sustainability at the heart of our procurement strategies. Local authorities spend huge amounts of money on supplies and services. Let's make sure that sustainability is at the heart of those procurement strategies and the supply chain that we're going to work with. But in Harrow itself, you know, that's the place that we want to focus our attention. We put in place an overarching strategy to deliver our climate emergency that was delivered last July. And yes, classically it's got 7 themes, but fundamentally it's about the what and the how. And the what is about clean energy and a transition to 100% low carbon and renewable energy solutions. It's about zero emissions transport. We've talked about walking and cycling. We've talked about low traffic neighbourhoods and what that means to people and what the impact that's having. But fundamentally, it's about improving the quality of the air that we all breathe within our environment. We want to work towards a waste-free borough and provide healthy places for people to enjoy. That's not rocket science, but let's focus on that happening. You know, let's protect and develop those green spaces. The greatest free aspect of the public health service that we have is our open spaces. So that's the what. But what about the how? And the how is about good governance and long-term sustainability. How do we maintain this focus? It's about eco-literate and engaged communities. You know, let's embed this way of working within our communities. It's not just at the behest of the local authorities to deliver this, but it's also got to be socially just. Those who are most vulnerable within the community, within our society, shouldn't be hit hardest by this transition. How do we protect them within this? Within Harrow, our strategy's it looks 2 ways. First of all, within the local authority, what can we do within our own stewardship of our organisation to make sure that we are doing all that we can? But secondly, how do we use our soft power to work with others and bring them together, and bringing together the public, the private and the community and voluntary sector to work together to pull together a joint approach for how we work collectively and collaborative on reducing our carbon initiative and addressing the climate emergency across Harrow. In West London as a whole, we've worked well and moved quickly. So all the environment directors across West London come together and have developed and shaped our Green Recovery Plan. That's underpinned by our work with our partners in West London Waste Authority and the West London Business Organisation. We also have in place our West London Climate Emergency Officers Group, who are dovetailing together to bring those initiatives together. And more recently, reaching out across the small business sector in terms of the skills and business opportunities and doing that collectively, whilst at the same time working across London. So we're not working in isolation from London councils and the GLA. We're aligned to the Green New Deal and the opportunities for West London. It's our responsibility to go and seize those opportunities, and the ambition to double the size of London's green economy by 2030. Yes, I'm pleased with progress, how we're working together and our ambitions for the future, but Mark, it's fair to say there's a lot to be done here. Thank you.
I would say it's a massive change, massive challenge, I think. Bipin Jha, welcome to you. I know that you work often directly with households who are trying to sort of reduce their carbon footprint and lower their energy bills. How would you view this agenda, as it were, from a sort of almost a domestic point of view? How all of us, all the citizens of West London and indeed the capital beyond, should be thinking about our responsibilities in dealing with the climate emergency in that domestic setting?
Thank you, Mark, and good morning to everyone. My name is Bipin Jha. I'm the managing director of a company called WorkWork Limited. The company is into energy efficiency, and what we have been doing for the last 10 years is helping the households to reduce the energy bills, helping them to cut the carbon emissions, and anything which is green. That's what we have been doing for the last 10 years. Now, before I go back to go on the main topic, Mark, I would like to stress on something. We're talking about on the forum about green recovery and the green economy. And let me start with a very famous saying from a Greek philosopher, Plato, who has said that necessity is the mother of inventions. So when we're talking about green recovery here, I'm saying it's not a choice. It's a necessity for us, and that too, especially after this, COVID pandemic. Going back to the net zero carbon and what role we all can play to ensure that every household plays their bit. As a company, the best thing which we can do is the awareness. We help the households. We promote the green industry, how they can save carbon emissions, what is their bit they can do towards these carbon emissions. So as a company and as a business in the forefront of this delivery, and that too in the, I'm sure we all know about a scheme called Green Homes Grant, which is a flagship scheme which has been announced recently that will give households up to £10,000 to improve the energy efficiency of their home. And as a business, we will be in the forefront to deliver that to every household right across the nation, and particularly focus on the West London properties. So yes, answering your question, yes, we got a great role to play in delivering to ensure that every household do their bit to ensure that their homes are more energy efficient and the energy efficiency of the properties are enhanced as we go along with this funding.
Great, thanks, Bipin. We'll come back to discuss that a little bit more, I'm sure, in a moment. I want to now move to Jacinta Rousel from Westfield. And David was talking earlier, I think, about the importance of development and ensuring that development is done in a way that's going to add to our ability to get to net zero. Just give us a perspective, can you, on how a company like Westfield views its responsibilities in this sector and indeed in the sort of post-COVID recovery environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. So I think, hopefully many of you know, Westfield London is actually proud to be the largest retail destination in Europe. We cover 2.6 million square feet here in the heart of Hammersmith and Fulham. And so for us, it's very much a huge responsibility in terms of our kind of green and environmentally friendly agenda. It's critical that we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And just to give a bit of history, really, back in 2018, we were acquired by Unibail-Rodamco, who are a French organisation. So whilst we already had our own CSR strategy, that's now fully integrated within our group's Better Places 2030 strategy. So this was an ambitious project that we launched last year. Targets include halving our carbon footprint, tackling responsible consumption and supporting the circular economy. And Better Places 2030 is really key to the long-term success of our business. And it's important for us that we're accountable to that progress. Consumer demands are changing. People have different opinions and expectations with regards to transparency on sustainability. And for us, it's making sure that we are showing our visitors that we're meeting those expectations when they're coming here to the centre. So talking specifically about innovations that we do, we've got a number that run across the centre very successfully. We continue to invest in these. So we actually have a dedicated on-site contractor managing the full waste management, reducing volumes. They work with our retailers on-site sorting and educating retailers as well in how best to make sure that they're disposing of their waste correctly. Just this month in September, we, with our community team, launched the Nature Reserve, so identifying a piece of unused land that sits directly behind our centre. We've developed this into a space for our community, which actually will provide education on ecology and also farming to local schools and businesses in the long term. How can our retailers benefit from that space as well, particularly our food and beverage operators? Last year, March 2019, we introduced some virgin pure water fountains across the centre. We've actually just introduced 2 more stations in the last few months, really encouraging people to reduce the need for purchasing plastic water bottles in the centre. So since that launch last year, we've seen the equivalent of 75,000 plastic water bottles being saved from using those stations. And actually, if you think we've spent probably the most part of this year in partial lockdown and we've not had the usual numbers of visitors at the centre, it's a really encouraging number for us and something that we're working with Virgin Pure on growing exponentially. And we've got future initiatives in the pipeline, so things like the coffee cup recycling schemes. And we also do a lot of work with electric vehicle partners in terms of our car parks for electric vehicle charging as well. I think there's an element really about looking at what the biggest successes are for us at Westfield London. So waste management and energy usage really have a significant impact for us, particularly given the size of our asset and the number of stakeholders here. We have zero waste to landfill. We've been doing that for a number of years now. We constantly hit around 85% when it comes to the recycling rate, and then the remainder goes to energy recovery. So like our sister centre in Stratford, we've had zero waste to landfill for a number of years. And in regards to the energy front, and particularly to David's comment earlier about development, you know, we added phase 2 on back in 2018, and that was a really good opportunity for us to learn from what we'd put into the building in 2008, look at what Stratford had done in 2011, and really look at enhancing that. So looking at our sub-metering, our analytics systems, how can we provide ourselves with granular detail on not just landlord energy, but also retailer energy? Where is it being used? How can we reduce unnecessary loads? And how can we more accurately monitor those activities? So all those things are considered as part of the development. And then when we take over the asset in terms of the management of that, that's something that we within the team here look at. And other schemes like the LED rollout is something that we're moving forward with and have been over the last couple of years and envisage finishing that in the next 2 years so that everything across the asset, going from car parks to back of house to external lighting, is all LED. And there's an opportunity really there for us to work with our retailers as well on what they can be doing in their own stores. And for us, that's a key point. It's the communication. It's the communication between us, our retailers, and the public. Everyone has a part to play, and we have so many people that are here at Westfield London that we hope will work with us in terms of achieving those ambitions. And, you know, our work is recognised. We've got our ISO 14001 accreditation. We achieved that in 2013, and that's reviewed and re-accredited annually. We've also, one of our targets for 2020 was to achieve BREEAM in use, which has been a little difficult because everything has to be done virtually, but we're getting there, and we'll expect to be awarded that accreditation in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then really, I think the final thing to kind of summarise on this in terms of how we take it forward and our ownership of it. It's really around sharing our ambitions and our targets and making sure we're held accountable to them, but also that our retailers and all the thousands of people that come to the centre know what we're trying to do and also what part they can play. And also then, aligning with the legislation that's coming from local government as well as the wider government.
Well, lots to talk about, Jacinta. We'll come back to you in a moment, but I want to introduce Nathan Pearce. Nathan, I understand you work with the Sharing Cities programme, which is, well, I'm not an expert, I'm sure you'll explain, but as I understand it, it's essentially a programme trialling technology to create sustainable cities across Europe. So Nathan, can you give us your thoughts on sort of post-COVID challenges for getting to net zero from your perspective?
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you very much, Mark. My name is Nathan Pearce. I'm Programme Director of Sharing Cities based at the Greater London Authority. So I'm working there for the Mayor of London, and the team that I run there, the Smart London team, also supports the Chief Digital Officer to lead on all things in terms of smart infrastructure and digital services. Smart and digital technology has a really important part to play in the decarbonisation of our cities and also in the recovery from COVID as well. And smart infrastructure and green infrastructure often very much goes hand in hand. Smart infrastructure enables you to be more efficient. That's the very nature of what makes it smart. And when we say efficient, this can be both in terms of generating carbon savings and also financial savings as well. And it generates data that allows you to then develop better services for your citizens and better and more efficient services elsewhere. Now in London, we have the target to become a zero carbon city by 2050. And the easy stuff is going to be, the decarbonising the grid and new buildings being zero carbon. I say easy in quotation marks. The really difficult bit is going to be retrofitting our existing infrastructure to make it carbon neutral. And then also encouraging people to change the way they live their lives. These kind of things are going to be absolutely vital if we want to meet these 2050 targets, but they're going to be really difficult. And that's where smart infrastructure and digital infrastructure can play a role. So you're right, Mark, at the GLA, we're running a programme of work that is exploring just this theme. The Sharing Cities project is London's largest smart city research and development programme. Funded by European Horizon 2020 funding, and we cover 6 cities. So it is London, and in London we're testing in Greenwich. We also cover Milan in Italy, Lisbon in Portugal, Warsaw in Poland, Bordeaux in France, and Burgash in Bulgaria. And we have a large partnership of 34 partners covering private sector, public sector, academics, who are testing 10 types of smart and green technology in all of those cities to see what works and then package up what works so that we can then promote it to other cities. And for me, working in the GLA, I have a particular interest in promoting this technology to other London boroughs. So to give you a quick example of the sort of things that we're doing, we've been retrofitting existing buildings, hundreds of apartments across those cities, with the latest in smart technology and a deep retrofit to make them as close to zero carbon as we can. And this includes Lisbon's historic UNESCO World Heritage Site, City Hall, as well as large council estates in Greenwich. So we've tested the whole kind of a range of retrofitting. We've created integrated electric mobility solutions that make it easier to not use a car in these areas. We've been utilising smart lampposts with a range of sensors that can tell us about the real-time health of a city. We've tested energy management systems that optimize energy inputs and outputs across a large area, sort of district or town area, which generate even larger savings on top of the retrofitting buildings. We're looking at like 10% energy savings through those systems. Now, we have trialled much of this. We're near the end of the programme. We're in the 5th year of the 6 years of the programme running, and we now know what works well and what doesn't. So the next stage that we're in is promoting this technology. We've captured a lot of the learning from this project in what we're calling our Sharing Cities playbooks, which are available for everyone for free. And the next stage now is focusing on how we can take this technology from the pilot level and mainstream it both across London, in the other cities I mentioned earlier, and also to a European level. Cheers, Mark.
Thanks very much indeed, Nathan. I want to just pick up, I think, and actually I should say that if any of the people in this virtual panel discussion would like to put a question to any of the panel, please do so. We're across that, and we'll certainly try and go through as many of those as we can. But the one area, David, I wanted to ask you about was the thing that Nathan mentioned right at the top of his thoughts, which is retrofitting. And I know, there is obviously there are new approaches to this, because many buildings really are very difficult to retrofit. I've heard about sort of sleeves which you can sort of almost go over buildings. From your sort of looking at it at a regional or city level, do you think we can realistically retrofit pretty much every building that requires retrofitting, or is it going to be just a question of doing what we can?
Well, I think let's come at it from the other way. We've got a climate emergency, and legally, the UK has said it will be a fossil-free economy by 2050. So I wouldn't say it's is this a can we or can't we? That's the law. That's what the government has said. We must then figure out how we do it. Retrofit is blooming difficult, but I would say there's two thoughts on this. One, just from a commercial perspective, if you own an office and you're changing your heating system now, then why wouldn't you install a zero carbon system now? Because otherwise you're putting in a heating or a cooling system that you will then have to take out before the end of its life, because you won't be able to operate it or sell or lease with EPC standards. The other piece, I suppose, which you can do the nice carrot piece, I think government will need to wrestle with for the stick piece that will say, you know what, the price of heat pumps, fossil-free heating and cooling is dropping so fast that, you know what, we will just say, a little bit like the legislation that is coming in on phasing down petrol and diesel vehicles, we will just say, you know what, hard stop, you will not be able to install gas boilers after a certain date. You need to retrofit from that. So I think it's a combo of the two, and that's why skills become so important for West London's gas engineers.
Well, skills we'll come on to in a second, but Paul Walker, I wanted just to ask you about the sort of practicalities for a borough like Harrow. You've got a lot of older buildings in sort of Metroland and beyond. How much of a responsibility does the borough take in terms of retrofitting the properties that you have an interest in? And I don't quite know, what your sort of building portfolio looks like now. But also, what are you doing to encourage house owners more generally to retrofit where they can and should?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. And I think it goes to the fact that the government set out kind of a range of funding opportunities which work across both the social housing sector and the private residential sector. I think for us it's very much unifying that strategy in terms of what funding is available. A part of that significant bid we've put in for West London, that initial £4 million, will start with the first 800 properties being retrofitted by March 2021. That's the first allocation of funding to public sector properties. We are very optimistic about being successful, and we will continue to develop and grow that. We have a team of housing officers working across West London, dealing with those properties in greatest need will become first priority. But we're also working with our private rented sector colleagues in terms of where the funding opportunities are, promoting those opportunities so people are understanding and aware of how they access those funds. Are the voucher schemes available? How do we make it easy for people to access the cash? How do we streamline the process? That's very much our role, that we can work with our own tenants, but also working with the private rented sector to make it easy for them to access the funds and grants which are available. So Harrow residents overall win, and therefore West London residents win overall, because we're retrofitting those properties. I talked about a decade of retrofitting. That's the programme that we think we're on. Huge impact on skills and employment creation in terms of being able to respond to that opportunity, and the government continue to provide the funding opportunities.
Yeah, I wanted, Bipin, we can't see you for the moment, or at least I can't, but perhaps this is an area I would like to get your thoughts. There we are. I would like to get your thoughts on retrofitting, because there are some homes that it's relatively straightforward, bit of loft insulation, wall insulation, and you can do it. But some of them structurally, it's just very, very difficult and can be quite expensive. What are you saying to your households where you do find yourself dealing with a property that's not, it's not an ideal retrofit situation? What are the options that you can bring?
Retrofit has been a challenge, Mark. New builds are quite easy and straightforward. So once you build a property, you bring it up to the standard level of EPC band A anyway. But retrofitting work does bring a challenge in the sense that we're dealing with the properties where you are working with the customers, elderly people who are living in the property with the kids. Now, the biggest challenge which we had faced and the various schemes has seen, we have done lofts, cavity walls, double glazing, pretty easy, straightforward. In terms of funding, the problem that we had was external wall insulation. Now, that is a major piece of work which is required in the London properties, because London properties are mostly solid. You can't put cavity wall inside because there is no cavity there. So the problem was funding. When we had Green Deal on the CERT and CESTA scheme, the funding wasn't that great to do the EWI from every side. It is a major piece of work which needs lots of investment. Now, luckily we have got Green Homes grant now, and if you got £10,000 property up to do that, that could become a viable options. So in terms of retrofitting, I think EWI has been a challenge, and we have been working closely with the London colleges, West London Business, to see how we can bring trained and skilled manpower to meet that demand of EWI. So we are very much focused on external wall insulation, and that is one thing which will help millions of properties in London to treat them, to ensure that these homes are insulated and they are brought to a certain level of EPC band between A and B. At the moment, if you see, just in West London, we have got around 800,000 properties which needs treatment, and more than 60% of them are in band D to G. So these properties, they clearly need treatment to ensure that their energy efficiency is improved.
Nathan, you seem to be suggesting encouragingly that there might be some technological advances in this area. I mean, is there hope round the corner, particularly around retrofitting those difficult properties?
Yeah, there's a bit of hope. I mean, the previous people have just spoken about some of the challenges, and they're the same challenges that we had. But I think some of the results that we've been seeing from the Sharing Cities programme are really quite impressive. In the buildings that we have done a deep retrofit on, we've been seeing 60 to 80% energy savings just from going in and changing the heating sources, doing the insulation, the cladding, and so on. So I think that's been really interesting. We've also been putting in smart controls, which are all about how you control the lighting, the temperature, the feel, and other aspects of living in a building. And someone mentioned a moment ago that the citizen engagement part is really important. It is really important, because one of the things that we have found is you can do a lot of work to a building to make it much more energy efficient. But as soon as someone decides to open their window or keep a door open or do something that messes with the way that the building works, then you can actually start to lose the gains that you made. So it's been really important for us to engage with residents right from the beginning, right through to the very end, because it's not just about changing the building, it's also about changing the behaviour of the people who live in that building as well. I
want to actually pick up on that behaviour change point with Jacinta, because the way that people going shopping at Westfield, you've got a lovely big car park, it's easy to drive, even though actually the public transport links are very good. We know that public transport's going to be a challenge while COVID is still a significant worry for people. What does Westfield see as its responsibility in encouraging people not to use their car? Because, obviously it's a lot easier, isn't it? If you're going shopping with a car, you can just shove all your stuff in the boot and you don't have to drag it home on the underground or on the bus.
Yeah, absolutely. As you just alluded to, Mark, we position our centres and have positioned our centres where we've got good public transport areas. We contributed significantly to the redevelopment of both Shepherd's Bush and White City. And we spend a lot of time working with our teams on green travel surveys, on plans, how we can encourage people to come here, whether it's by bike. So recently, and particularly over the COVID period, increasing our bike or bicycle parking facilities, whether we can encourage better wayfinding in terms of walking to the centre, because actually a huge amount of the population coming here live on the doorstep, and there's no reason why they couldn't just walk here. Naturally, you're always going to have people that, from a convenience point of view, exactly as you've said, want to come by car.
Literally just taking your purchases home.
Yeah.
Is there a way in which we can, sort of try and make so you don't physically you get the stuff and someone else delivers it? I mean, we do have logistics now, so that actually you don't have to have hundreds, thousands of shoppers all taking their cars into Westfield. You will actually make sure that their goods are sent to them.
Yeah, we do. And we offer that service through our guest services, actually, in terms of delivery to whether it's hotels. I mean, that's obviously for tourists who are not necessarily driving, but also for people that don't necessarily want to drive. And actually, less than 20% of people drive to Westfield London, which it does seem like a big number. But actually, if you look at over 30 million people a year, it's something that we are encouraging to try and reduce that number as much as we can. And we look at things like shuttle buses as well. It's something that that has been looked at, particularly post-COVID, in terms of helping with the NHS and other institutions that are trying to provide safer transport, avoiding public transport in terms of trains and tubes, so that we try and help with mitigating COVID, but also not bringing extra cars onto the road. So there's different innovations like that. And the other one really that we're partnering with quite heavily, and something we've been looking at over a number of years already and is increasing, is really electric vehicles. So whether that's actually, we're going to be bringing a new hire company, rental company. So we've always been very key to a lot of people in the local area who don't have cars and necessarily, would want to come and hire a car. So we've always worked with the likes of Avis and other partners, but actually looking at electric vehicle companies and also the likes of Tesla and other electric vehicle suppliers, and how we can be integral to their supply chain, so that, we're promoting that when people are choosing to drive to the centre. And that will become very prevalent come 2021 with the ULEZ as well.
Yeah, I suppose we've talked a lot about sort of behaviour change, encouraging people to do the right thing, and the way what you're describing are schemes which just make it easier for people to do the right thing. And I'm thinking also of your tenants, of the shops and the chains that operate out of Westfield. You mentioned waste management.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think that Westfield has a responsibility to encourage your tenants to do the right thing, that it's partly down to you to make Westfield a sort of net zero building in the end?
Absolutely. We take that responsibility seriously. We manage the waste management side of things. So in effect, it means that we are able to control that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the retailers don't play their part. And actually, over the years, we've been strengthening the clauses, the green lease clauses within our leases. So there are kind of 6 key areas that we're really focused on making a contractual obligation to our retailers. So whether that's procuring their materials sustainably for fit outs, using LED in their stores, which I mentioned earlier, procuring renewable electricity and energy. Now, the centre supply is 100% renewable, but if they choose not to take that, making sure it meets that criteria. As you mentioned, complying with the waste management system. And that really involves us having a dedicated team on site, the education, meeting with retailers and taking them through that. And then we also touch on travel and jobs as well in the local economy, and making sure that there's a contractual obligation on retailers to take ownership for that.
Excellent. We are getting a few questions through, some on chat, some on Q&A. It's all platforms are welcome. The question, actually, Bipin, the question for you, I think you already mentioned the sort of the scale of the retrofit challenge in West London, but the question from Andrew Dakers is, do you have enough skilled workers to deliver at that level of challenge?
There is a shortage. And we have discussed this with the various industry bodies. Something in terms of innovations, and something which we have nicely come with the West London colleges, we have set up a EWI sector-based work academy in West London with the help of the 2 colleges and Job Centre and WorkWork as one of the employer, where we are trying to encourage people to joined these sector-based work academy to ensure that we, as a company or the supply chain within this industry, has called a skilled and trained manpower to ensure that we can meet the challenge of ensuring that huge demand is met. So yes, it is there is a scarcity of trained, skilled manpower in the industry, but I think we are all working on it, and hopefully this is not just 6 months program. And as Paul and others have said, that retrofit will be there for next 10 years if we need to see that has got some impact on our existing buildings. So yes, we are working towards it, and I'm glad to say that this is a scheme which, with the West London colleges and West London Business, it is one of the first in the nation, and hope this will catch momentum, and this will set an examples for the other colleges to follow.
Paul Walker, on that question of skills, I mean, I'm sure all the boroughs will be. And we've talked already about skills as part of the build and recovery plan, but specifically skills around the greening of West London. Presumably that is a big part of your thinking.
It is, and I think we talked a lot about retrofitting, but that's where the big opportunities are, both in terms of job creation and the skills that are needed in terms of retrofitting and delivering that decade of retrofitting over time. And Bipin's referred to the innovative thinking and work that's being done with local colleges, and how we bring together that opportunity and feed that into the curriculum development in terms of those green skills opportunities. The more forward-thinking colleges seeing that as an opportunity for the next phase in their development and how they respond to the emergency. And that's being taken up now. Those courses are being developed around green recovery and green skills with our local colleges and taking that forward.
Yeah, that really seems absolutely key. Nathan, there's a question here from Seema Malhotra. She says, talking about integrated thinking, what opportunities do we see for other new modes or models of transport, as well as greening existing models, including more that is disability friendly? Are any local manufacturing focused academic research institutions involved in new transportation technology innovations that could be piloted for city living? I mean, this is another obviously huge area potentially, and I think you mentioned buses or something, they've come up before. What are the sort of big growth areas potentially in terms of changing the sort of carbon footprint of transport networks?
I think there's a couple of things here, and linking back to the COVID recovery as well. I think a lot of us have noticed a large increase in the amount of cars that are on our road at the moment, and this is a big challenge. It was always a challenge for London. Now it's an even bigger challenge that there's reduced capacity on our buses, and people are quite rightly a bit worried about getting on trains. So I think the big sort of change, I think, in the next few years, and certainly over the next 10 years, will be something needs to be done to address car use in London and to increase much more accessible, easy to access, integrated transport options. And this is mainly going to be electric. You can already start to see this. I think electric bikes and electric scooters play a very interesting part in people getting around the city much, much quicker. You can get from zone 3 to zone 1 in about 20 minutes on an electric bike, and that's quite a good way to do it. We're also looking at options where, for blocks of flats, could you have a shared electric car that everybody in that block of flats could access on some kind of booking system, thereby encouraging people to own their own private cars less and less. But I think it's all about integration. I mean, further into the future, you're probably going to be looking at subscription-based models on our Oyster card system that allow you to book an electric car in a kind of Uber-style system, along with your train journey and your bus journey as well. So there's a few different things that we're looking at. The main thing that we need to look at from a decarbonisation point of view is to reduce the amount of car use, particularly diesel vehicles, in the city. And really, it's going to be about electric mobility and integrated mobility solutions. That's the way that we'll be able to address it.
Thank you, Nathan. As somebody who dutifully bought a diesel, very low emissions car some years ago, I'm not the only one now finding I'm the enemy of the planet. But there we are. I did my best.
Bad luck with that one. I'm sorry.
We've got just a few minutes left, and I wondered if I could ask each of our panelists just to consider where we are, particularly in relation to the sort of post-COVID recovery. I mean, it's obviously this agenda obviously sits well beyond just dealing with the pandemic, but clearly there is going to be a huge challenge for the West London region and for all of us actually in trying to think about how we adjust our lives both for the pandemic and to actually take advantage of some of the things that we did notice during lockdown, like cleaner air and fewer cars around. So literally, if I could ask, we've got 3 minutes, so perfect. So 30 seconds each. You've really got that's one big point that I'd like you all to make. And we'll start with David. David Simons, yes. What would your 30 seconds be?
I would say that Londoners, we surveyed West London people, they know the names on average of 2.5 names of their neighbours. If you live in a flat, 70% of Londoners who live in a flat know nobody else in their block. After COVID, there is an opportunity to build back better with community. So that's walking, that's cycling, and that's using local high streets as an opportunity to build community for the half of Londoners who are now working from home.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, thank you for that. Paul, what would your 30 seconds be on how we can deal with COVID and the planet at the same time?
I think the unique trick here is about collaborations and how the very best of the public and the private and the community and voluntary sector come together here, get behind a unifying strategy for their area, for their sub-region, and recognise each has a responsibility and a part to play in delivering the solution and the outcome that we want in the post-COVID, post-climate emergency world.
So maybe that whole sense of community thing that David was mentioning is important on a number of different levels. Bipin, from your perspective, difficult times for every business, I'm sure, but what would your sort of homily be at the end of this panel?
For all the businesses in West London and the public and private bodies to take this as an opportunity, the green growth and the green recovery. For the consumers, take advantage of the Green Homes Grant. There's a money aside for you to take advantage of it. And for the public and private bodies and the government to ensure that there's a continuity in funding, which is very, very important for the industry to survive. Thank you.
The government has a role in this as well.
Yes.
Jacinta, yes, I mean, I'm sure Westfield, like everywhere, is trying to sort of deal with all the sort of post-COVID or in middle of COVID challenges. But what are you hoping will come out of it? Is there a way of us finding a greener new normal?
I think actually both Paul and David have summarised it quite well. And the 2 points would be collaboration and community. I think we're stronger and more powerful as a group. So I think making sure that we keep those links between the West London businesses and that we're also tied in with local government and central government as well, and pushing that agenda from all fronts, and really community's never been more important. Personally, at Westfield London, we're here about bringing community together safely. We recognise we've got a great opportunity to give people a safe environment to be, particularly if you're working from home in the local area and you're trying to get out, and giving businesses the opportunity to still thrive in the current climate. So collaboration and community.
Okay, well that does seem to be a theme. Nathan, just a final sort of 15, 20 seconds from you.
I think the word I would use would be acceleration. It's not like we're doing lots of different things after COVID. We've always had flexible kind of working arrangements. We've always collaborated digitally, and we've been decarbonising for a while. But COVID and the recovery has definitely accelerated all three of those things, and we want to make sure that we don't take our foot off the gas.
Excellent. It's been an absolutely terrific panel. So thank you to David, Paul, Bipin, Jacinta and Nathan.